Thank you for coming to the launch. I've been thinking about launching. We launch rockets and 1,000 ships and our adult children, hopefully. My adult child is here. So it's very fun to think about launching. This book is a lot about parent-child relationships. And so I think that's appropriate when we're thinking about launching our families, launching our kids. That's an appropriate entree to this book. And launching the children of the world. There's also a matter of tenure in this book, and I thought it was interesting to put it in the epigraph at the beginning that tenure is from the old French verb to hold. And I like to think about holding children and holding our families when we think about all the horrible things that go on in this book. No, it's not. It's not that horrible, actually. Before I read, I want to remind everyone that there's cake. So some of you might be thinking I was promised cake, and that is afterwards at Barbette. Everyone here is invited to Barbette for a private party. We have the place to ourselves. Go to the back of the restaurant, and we'll have drinks and appetizers and a giant cake. So please don't make me eat that alone. Please come. I'm grateful that it's a warm enough night we can walk. It's over on Irving and Lake Street. So please come to that. So I think what we're going to do is I'll read a little bit, and then I'll talk a little bit, and then you'll ask me questions. Okay? So, gosh, thank you so much for coming. All these faces from writing groups and book clubs and other book clubs and other book clubs. I'm in a lot of book clubs. And old friends and family. Thank you. So, Good Samaritan. I'm going to read. This book is told in 4 points of view. And I'm going to read from 2 of them, very briefly, from 2 of them, right from the front page, so there's no spoilers in what I'm reading. Okay. I know people get really tense about that. So first I'll read from Matthew's point of view, and then I'll switch to Claire, who is his daughter. First of all, I didn't know there was a body on the porch. I barely knew what a feed store was, and it didn't matter because this was Sunday night and everything was closed. Anyway, I wasn't looking for fertilizer when I stopped at the quaint little hardware store for farmers. I was desperate for shelter. For the past half hour on I-35 South, I'd been white-knuckling it through heavy rain and low visibility, while other cars had clustered under bridges. But when the hail started, pummeling my Subaru with ice pellets, my need for protection became urgent. Fortunately, I had reached my exit, the one I took on my weekly commute to campus. As I veered off the highway, half a mile's feed and seed was the first place I saw with an overhang.
Is he your hair?
The moment I pulled under the carport, the racket stopped. Relief. I switched off the wipers and caught my breath. Then, in the glare of my headlights, I saw it, a lump on the porch. It was covered with a tarp, and it could have been anything, a bag of seed, a coil of rope, a mound of dirt. But as I stared at the shape, I understood it was a body. Humans recognize other humans. A simple truth I explained to my first years every fall in Sociology 101. I didn't know whether this tarp-covered human was dead or alive, and frankly, which would be worse. All I knew was I couldn't take my eyes off that lump. Perhaps it was my training as a sociologist to be curious. Perhaps it was my instinct as a dad to be filled with dread. But I should have listened to Claire. I should have stayed in Minneapolis. So dramatic. And now I'll read from Claire. I was taught to stay away from strangers, but I thought that meant avoiding people who were strange, like weirdos on the street. or anonymous people, random criminals, and monsters. No one warned me to watch out for the people I already knew or who knew me. Nice people. Or the boy I liked. No one said those might be the ones to hurt me. The boy I liked was Evan Lewis. He had long eyelashes and a thick neck. We were lab partners in biology because of the alphabet. Otherwise, he never would have chosen me. Not that there was anything wrong with me. I wasn't ugly, just tall. And I got good grades. My hair wasn't long or styled smooth. It was bushy and tangled, not like the girls Evan normally hung out with. The Cheryl Gundersons and the Julie Chesleys. Girls whose voices were loud and husky from smoking. Sexy girls with blue eyeliner and multiple earrings, tight jeans, and clingy tops that showed their bras, and no jackets in the winter, even when it snowed. I was more practical, and I hated being cold. I knew cigarettes killed cilia in the lungs, and I did better on tests when I wore comfortable clothing. If we had chosen our own seats, I would have been in the front row so I could see the chalkboard better. But Mrs. Biggerstaff had a seating chart, so Evan and I shared a two-person desk in the last row, and we did all our experiments together. Testing water and making smoke, microscopes and beakers. I loved everything about biology, except for cutting into dead things. That was Evan's favorite part. Okay, great. So you can read the rest yourself. I hope you enjoy reading about the four characters. The two other characters are the lump that was covered by a tarp and a social worker. So it was fun for me to learn about social work and sociology to write these characters, and fun for me to be in the shoes of a 12-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl again, back in 1992, which is when the book is set. So if you were around back in 1992, you might enjoy that. You might enjoy going back there, especially right now. Take me back. Take me back. Now, people ask me, why did you write a second book? I wonder that too. Mainly because I had a contract to write a second book. And, which, my mom asked me, was that pressure, a challenge, or an opportunity? And of course, it's all three. But during the writing of it, I mostly felt the pressure. I mostly was miserable. I mostly didn't enjoy it. And I complained about it a lot to everybody around me, who saw the challenge and who saw especially the opportunity. And I was blinded by the pressure for a lot of the writing process. And so it's times like this that I really get to realize and appreciate the opportunity that it was and the challenge that it was, and how challenge can be a blessing and a real positive thing, a puzzle to work out. Why did you sign a 2-book deal if you didn't want to write a second book? Well, funny story. I never thought it was going to be a 2-book deal. I never even thought I was going to publish the first book that I wrote. I just wanted to find out how the story ended. So I just kept writing that first book until I got to the end. Yay! And when I got to the end, I started to think, well, what would it be like to see about getting published? I didn't know anything. Annie said I was a lawyer my whole career. I was just doing employment discrimination. I wasn't studying the publishing industry or anything like that. I was just trying to figure out how the story ended. And so I was such a newbie to it. And when I got my agent, I needed to know everything. I was a sponge, and I was asking her, okay, she said, all right, do you have time on Thursday to talk to a senior editor at HarperCollins? And I'm like, yeah, I think I have time to talk to a senior editor. But I needed my agent to tell me, what do I do? What do I say? What is the purpose of this phone call? What are they going to ask me? What should I ask them? And one of the things so when she told me, well, I don't know. I mean, you can ask them about what their marketing plan. I mean, she really didn't seem too worried about it. Just ask them what their marketing plans are. You could ask them how they like to work with authors on a second book. You know, she had that kind of casual attitude about it, and I was furiously taking notes, word for word, that this is what I'm going, how it's going to go. So when the call happened, and I asked about the marketing plans, answer, follow up, answer. Then I went to question number 2. Yes, how do you like to work with authors on a second book? And this was a phone call, not a Zoom, and so I wish I could have seen her face, but I heard the silence on the line, and then sort of a, I guess we could make it a 2-book deal. As if I was doing this high-stakes negotiation. As if I'm just, oh, let's see, HarperCollins, if I'll go with you. And so she's like, I'll talk to your agent about it and we can make that happen. So then that's what happened. And I said to my agent, thanks a lot. Now, now what am I supposed to do? 18 months? It took me 12 years to write the first one. 18 months. I'm supposed to deliver another one with no ideas? I mean, I just, that is why there was pressure and stress. And my agent's like, well, you have another book, and you don't you? And I'm like, sure, So, but as my mom reminded me again, I did have another story that was in me, and I had written it as a short story, and it was getting a little bit unwieldy. It was getting to be a very long short story. And I thought, and I had another one that was also a short story that was longer than it should be. And it had occurred to me that I would like the luxury of taking more time with these characters and their story to see what actually was going to happen to them. So I told my agent, all right, okay, I have 2 ideas. She goes, just send me a paragraph on each one. Like, she doesn't care. Like, she didn't care. Just a couple sentences for each of those 2 stories. And what she didn't know is these stories were weird. Like, these were not like real people. Like, one had a starfish in it that was, like talking. I mean, these were not novel type. I mean, I didn't want to write a novel that way. I can't explain it. But I had to translate the elements of those short stories into a more normal family drama, suspense, psychological thriller plot. So I sort of translated, there's a nerdy guy, he has a promotion, because of the promotion he encounters a young life, starfish, and he becomes obsessed with the young life, and because of that obsession, he risks and damages key relationships and the job, the very promotion that he was so happy to get. And then I don't want to say more because I don't want to ruin the rest of the book, as if that really ruined it. So I translated that, and I did that for the other story too. And my agent said, that one, not that one. I just sent it in an email, and they signed the contract. And then I had an 18-month deadline. So that's why I wrote the second book. Yeah. So how did it become The Good Samaritan? At first, the nerdy guy was a professor. I mean, at first he was an actuary, but then he became a professor. And I wanted him to be a professor of sociology because I was fascinated with the idea of finding a small living thing and becoming obsessed with it and wanting to help nurture it and make it grow. And so I wanted to study motivation theory and all the negative side effects of motivation theory and why we even try to help each other and why we're afraid to help each other. And that naturally got me right into the Good Samaritan law, because as you know, the Good Samaritan is a Bible parable, not a true story, but a story that reveals truth. And many states have laws called Good Samaritan laws that either encourage or require us to help an injured person on, if we encounter them. You're all like, yes, I'm familiar with this law. And the thing about the law is then, if you hurt somebody while you're helping them, they can sue you. And you know, they will. Or they might. And, you know, you might be afraid of being sued. And so that might prevent you from helping somebody. Well, these Good Samaritan laws are meant to take that fear away so that we will freely help each other without fear of being sued. And I thought that was fascinating, and I wanted my sociology professor to tell me about that. So that's why he became a sociology professor. And I took sociology courses. I went back to school in my own way and read all these textbooks, and I got real nerdy about it and learned so much about altruism and motivation theory that was really just me nerding out. And I didn't have time for that. I only had 18 months. What was I doing? I had to get going. So that is why he was a sociology professor. And he's a sociology professor on the verge of tenure. And I thought that was interesting too, from the French verb to hold. He wants to hold so much, and he's messing everything up. Everything he's trying to hold, he's messing up. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but maybe there'll be a little bit of that you can relate to. So it's fun to make up a fictional liberal arts college in southern Minnesota. The fictional college is St. Gustav. And you can have your opinions about which one it really is. They don't say ya, but I did have to make up a different chant. So that'll be fun for you to find that chant in there. And that was fun. A lot of people ask me how was it different writing the second book? You know, was it easier? Hadn't you learned so much? No, not really. No, I found it almost harder, and I thought, how can I be going through all this again? You know, I had some tantrums because I expected myself to be farther along. Yes, I had a software program that I had kind of learned, and I had a sort of a structure in mind. I had learned that I could trust myself through it, that it was going to be awful. I had gotten experience with critique and criticism and feedback. I'd like to share with you now my process for taking criticism and feedback. Multi-step process. Because I wrote this 4 different times from scratch, at least 4 different times completely from scratch, and then multiple deep revisions. So why did I do that? Because I got feedback that it was not there yet. And it was much more difficult feedback than the way I just said it, which, you know, was that so hard? No, I got really tough feedback on earlier versions of it, and here's my process. First, total devastation. Gut wrench, punch, blinding, little blindness. Just total depression and sorrow, confusion, darkness, really, real devastation. That's a key step in the process. And then waiting. Just go away, wait a few days. Return to the scene and read it as words and finding sense and balance and truth in it, and actually really helpful stuff. And then get excited. Get excited. This is the challenge part, the fun challenge, the puzzle. And it's a process of diverging, brainstorming. How can we solve these problems, and how might we overcome these things? And that is the expansion time, and that is the challenge that really lights a fire in me and really motivates me. And so, for example, in this one, Matthew at first was too clean cut, and he, he didn't swear, he didn't use swear words, and that was considered, unrealistic. And it's hard for me to say, well, I know very many people who don't use swear words, so I know that it's possible. But there are, so I had to find some vices for him. So so one of the things I do is brainstorm all kinds of vices. Like I got into really gross, ugly, horrible vices that I just had to brainstorm constantly, all kinds of vices. And your imagination is always much worse than the reality. For me anyway, I don't know. I assumed everyone was like that. So I imagined a whole bunch of horrible vices, and then I, converged it and eventually found a solution that actually solved several other problems. Him having these vices solved other problems that were also in the devastating feedback. So it was sort of, for example, he has a problem with alcohol. Not the worst vice in the world, but in this situation, it was a bad situation. Well, that was the reason why he couldn't call 911 when he found the body. He'd been drinking, The original clean-cut Matthew wouldn't have been like that. That was a problem I had to solve. That's an example of how that process of total devastation, time, read it for the truth, get excited, then brainstorming, that process really helps solve a lot of problems in this book. Enough about that. We have cake. We have cake to get to. So that's an intro. We are gonna take some questions from you. I'm really anxious to hear what you would like to know, and I'll answer them the best I can. Yes.
Why 1992?
Why 1992? Well, there were some good tunes from back then. Now, okay, there's a little. Why 1992? Many reasons. Most important reason, and it was this way in The Surrogate as well, my first book, I wanted to choose a time frame when there weren't ways to track people down with digital devices. And also, I was a little more familiar with high school in 1992 than the current times. And my exposure to high school in more recent times was horrific. It was a horrific exposure. So I wanted to go back to that time. There is a connection to The Surrogate in this book that if you've read it, I won't say what it is, but that's also a reason why it was 1992. I'll just leave it at that. Yes?
So who decided on 18 months, and did that come up? Like, could it be like 20, 24, whatever?
So referring back to the contract, who decided on 18 months for the deadline for the second book? I think that was just a standard thing in the contract. No one ever asked me, no one ever explained it to me, but I don't know, maybe any other writers know if that's just a standard thing. Some people write a book a year. I'm never going to be that person. And I signed the contract in May of 2020, so obviously I got a couple of extensions because that was even before The Surrogate had come out. I had to start writing this and get all that feedback and do all those revisions. And then I got extension after extension. And I finished it last year, so it took a year for it to, whatever they do over there at HarperCollins. Yes.
So as you were describing, going south on I-35 and going into some little town, imagined town, did you do road trips yourself while you were writing this book?
Did I do road trips down I-35?
To inspire yourself.
To inspire myself. Absolutely. I went down to all the college towns in southern Minnesota, and it's a wonderful thing to do. And I had done a writing program down at one of the places down there, and so I had in my mind, I had actually lived on campus and walked around on campus, and so that was also really great research. But I drove around a lot down there and looked at farms and barns and grain elevators, because there is a farm family here and they have a beautiful house. I think it's beautiful. And I saw it when I went down there. After I had written it, I went and I was looking for it. Where is it? Where is it? That's it. That's the one that was in my head. And maybe you'll do that too when you read a book and then you go around and you see either somebody or something that you imagined in that book that you were reading. That looks like, you know, the porch or the thing or the, and that happened to me when I went down again on other road trips. But yeah, that was a fun thing to do, go down and be in those places. Yes.
So was it hard to really inhabit 4 different characters' mindsets? And I mean, was there one that you really gelled with more than the others, and did you write one character at a time, or skip around? Point of view.
I love this question. There's like multiple questions. Was it hard to hold up 4 characters' point of view in mind? Did you have a favorite one to inhabit? And did you write them all at the same time, or did you skip around? I skipped around, although sometimes in revision I would squoosh all the character chapters together and just read those through and play around with them just to make sure they made sense that way, so that when I piece them apart again, they're still intact. And somebody asked me this in The Surrogate too, which also had 4 point of view characters. Whichever one I'm writing, that's the one I most enjoy inhabiting. And you know, there are days, just like anybody, there are days you don't feel like doing something. There would be days when I didn't feel like inhabiting that character, and you just have to keep doing it. But I don't want to pick one. There were aspects about each character that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed inhabiting. It was fun to have, you know, and I did this in The Surrogate too, I guess. Male and female, different ages, different levels of education, different perspectives coming to it. It was that's something I really believe in, is trying to see different perspectives anyway in solving problems in law, actually, and looking at legal problems, looking at it from not just our client's point of view, but from the opposing side's point of view, and the judge's point of view, and the jury's point of view. Really, really trying to be, if you're able to really do that, I think you're going to have a more effective solution, and it's going to be easier to work with a person like that who's able to see it from different perspectives. So I enjoyed that. There are a number of lawyers in the room who are really enjoying that last comment. Yes?
And I have to ask, is there going to be a book 3?
Is there going to be a book 3? Well, I only had a 2-book deal, thank goodness. So here's where the opportunity part comes in. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have a book deal for another book? This will be my first time writing. Yes, there will be, in my mind. I'm writing a book right now, but I don't have a contract. So it's the blessing and the curse on that, because maybe I'll never sell it, but I don't have any pressure, and I can just write the book I want to write, and I can just explore how the story goes and see how it ends the way I think I enjoy writing better. So, but my next book is about some vigilant neighbors in a neighborhood. There's one neighbor who's very vigilant and knows all the city ordinances, and of course it has to have a legal aspect. I'm really into city ordinances right now, and I know many of you are too. I'm not going to name names, but I know some people who are really into city ordinances. So she's really into the city ordinances, and another person moves into that neighborhood who's also very vigilant and into city ordinances in a little bit different way. So, so that's what I'm working on right now. Did the speaker end?
Yeah.
All right,
That's fine, we can
Yes? Somebody raised your hand.
I did.
Oh, yes.
Okay, since I don't write fiction, how hard is it to come up with names of people that you want to inhabit? The actual names. I mean, we've named kids, but that's different in a way, but how do you do that?
How do you name characters that you want to inhabit? Is it like naming kids? Yeah, it's like naming kids, except you don't have anyone to argue with you about what's a good name. I love finding names. Sometimes they're just obvious to me, like Digger in The Surrogate. Suddenly that name, that was Digger. I've never met anyone named Digger. I don't even know if it's a real name, but that was this character's name. And so that's really a good day when that happens. Some days I go pouring through all the baby name books and like Norse culture names, you know, and all kinds of really, and looking at the time period and I, you know, and I don't want it to be a name like of someone in my direct, like I wouldn't choose Stephanie because that's my sister's name, or Pierce because that's her husband, but sorry. But I just don't want it to be weird, you know, like weird. So, and then I try not to have characters that have names that start with the same first initial, because that's a pet peeve of mine when I'm reading. If they have the same first initial, my brain completely confuses them. So that's just my thing, that I avoid that. Oh, good. We can start a club on that. So I enjoy it. I have fun. I mean, who wants to have 50 kids? You know, like it's fun to be able to name human beings, you know, well, fictional beings, you know, in a way that is, why not have some fun with it? Yeah. It's hard when they change, though, halfway through the revision. Somebody that I was calling one name, then I suddenly have to call them a different name. But that's on me. Yeah.
What is your writing routine?
What is my writing routine? Yeah, it'd be good to get one. I don't have a set time or place that I write. I write on a laptop, and I like to write for at least an hour, sometimes 4 hours. After 4 hours, I usually don't write after 4 hours. But there have been days, there have been times. I have this one little cubby that I like to go to. It's at our family's lake cabin, and it's got a curtain on it. It's like a little bed alcove, and I just close the curtain. I got a lot of pillows, and there's a little light on in there, and no one even knows I'm in there. And sometimes that's a problem because, you know, I scare them or something when I open the curtain. But that's a good place for me to write. Yeah.
Did any of your characters try to persuade you to take their point of view rather than the character you had chosen to give voice to plot? I mean, do they argue about who gets to tell the story?
We can find help for you, Tom. There's help for you.
I was going to ask about Sandy Blake James.
Yes. He's asking if my characters argue with each other or argue with me about the story that they're telling and that I want to tell. I let them do it all. I'm writing along going, really? Oh my God, seriously? Why? Okay, you know, and I just enjoy that. That I love not having to think about, you know, like I do enough thinking in the law part, other parts of my life. So when I'm with them, I just let them take the lead, and I just like to see where it goes. It's very much fun and shocking. And then sometimes I'm like, I know what you're up to, you know, but there's nothing I can do about it. So, yes.
As a mom, how did it feel to write as a dad?
As a mom, how did it feel to write as a dad? I think it's a beautiful thing to realize that moms and dads are similar, the core ways that they're similar, in the core ways that there's that love for the child and that desire to connect and that desire to protect. And also in the realization that there are flaws and failures that can be life-altering and devastating, and that there can be healing and forgiveness in all of it. And so that was very powerful. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful thing, as I said at the beginning, the parent-child relationship. It's just the thing that fascinates me. It's just the thing I want to dwell in. And I think that's what The Surrogate was about, and I think that's what this is about. And how we can come together in that pain, the pain of being a parent. Even when we're doing the quote-unquote best job possible, it's hard and it's painful, and we're always questioning ourselves. And we all need grace in that arena with ourselves and for each other. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Anyone else? Dave, didn't you have your hand up? Oh, okay, great.
Any other questions?
Can you just give a little synopsis of The Surrogate? I didn't read that yet.
Oh, well,
yet,
oh, let's
but I'd
plug
like
The
to-
Surrogate. Great.
I'd like to hear what it's about, other than a surrogate.
Yeah, she's asked what's the surrogate. Everyone here, I think everyone but maybe 3 people I know has read The Surrogate. Maybe 5 people. The Surrogate was inspired by the Baby M case, which was a case in the 80s where the surrogate changed her mind and went on the run with the baby. And back in those days, there was no TV. This is the time period I love. There's no security cameras or cell phones. There's no way to track anybody down. You could run away and be gone, be lost. And that's what happened with Mary Beth Whitehead in the real story. And at that time, I was in law school, and I happened to be in a family law class. And so our family law professor was using this real life story in the news to teach us the law of the best interest of the child. The best interest of the child is the legal standard that we use for divorce cases. And where should this child go? What's the best interest of the child? And in the Baby M case, eventually they found her. There was a lawsuit. The courts went back and forth. The baby went back and forth. And the courts used the best interest of the child standard, the divorce standard, in a surrogacy matter. And this was way before IVF and things like that. I mean, she uses her own egg. She's artificially inseminated. It's like a million years ago, it seems, but it was the late 80s. And so the baby was born. It was her, genetic child, but she had agreed to turn it over. And I was 22 years old, 23 years old. I mean, I wasn't married, I didn't have children, but I thought maybe someday I would. And it was just fascinating to me to be a law student, totally idealistic, loving the law, and watch this case, which we watched through reading the newspaper and watching the nightly news. Those were the updates, the only updates we got, and nobody knew where she was. And have this amazing law professor breaking this down for us, and how the law, what tools the law had to solve this very messy human problem. And it just made a huge impact on me. And I wanted to know, where did this woman go with a baby, and how did she live, and how did she survive, and what was she doing? And how did that feel for the intended parents? How devastating must that have been to not know where she was and whether they would get the child, and what is the best interest of the child in this situation? And how do we as a society, are we okay with this law, the instrument of law, getting involved in this and using this standard? And I mean, these things were just with me for 25 years, basically, these questions. living my life, not thinking of writing a book. And then I did get married, I did have a child, and I got divorced. And they used the best interest of the child standard. And that was like everything crushing, coming together on a personal level for me. And it was, boy, really, how much do you charge per hour? When I met my second husband and we were getting married, we went to therapy, and my therapist suggested you should start writing. And when I started writing, that story came out. And it wasn't the Baby M story, it was just this young couple with a baby, and they were hiding it, and I didn't know why they were hiding it, and I just had to write for 12 years till I figured out whose baby was it, and how'd they get it, and what was going to happen to that. So that's why I'm 62 years old now. You know, these things take time. So that's the plus side of things. So yeah, check it out. They might be selling it at this store. I don't know. So, yeah, it was three or 4 years ago we launched The Surrogate in this very room, and many of the same faces were here. And I am so grateful to all of you for being there then, for being here now, for all the new faces that have come tonight. Including there's a real professor in the audience from St. Olaf. and that's just a fact that I'm aware of.
Is it a sociology professor?
No. I won't say more about it, but to protect the person. So anyway, this is all to say thank you so much for coming out again, for coming out for the first time. Many of you, I'm going to be at your book club. I'm going to be at your book club. I'm going to be at your book club. We're going to have a good time talking about this book. Once you've read it and you're ready to get to the end, then we can talk about more of the nitty-gritty in there. Thank you all. You've all inspired me in some way or another, whether you know it or not. And you nourish me and cheer me on, and I'm really grateful. And I really want to eat cake with you and drink drinks over at Barbette. It's a nice night for a walk, so I will see you over there, okay?